There's a type of fear that only games can create. It's not the jump scares we see in movies, it's something different. It's you holding the controller, entering a dark path or a claustrophobic corridor, knowing something is there. And yet, you go anyway. It's you being chased and feel so powerless that you can only run and hide. That fear is unique. There's something very honest about fear. When we play horror games, we let our guard down. We become vulnerable. It's just us, the screen, and wherever the game decides to throw at us. There's no faking courage, you either endure it or you don't. And that's exactly what makes these games special. Today, we are going to explore the games that made my heart skip a beat. This is a personal list, and I had to think about it a lot because there's so many excellent horror games. But I'm curious to know yours, so feel free to comment. As always, leave a like to the video and subscribe to the channel. I'm Yugito, and let's talk about it. Amnesia the Bunker takes place in 1916, during World War I. A French soldier wakes up alone in an abandoned bunker, surrounded by darkness, with only a battery-powered flashlight in his hand. No allies, no way out, and something living within the walls. For me, this is the most unique and terrifying game in the franchise, mainly because there are no linear corridors you can memorize. There are no patterns you can learn. The bunker is a semi-open, dark, damp, claustrophobic labyrinth, and somewhere within the walls lives something that has no name, no defined form, and no mercy. What makes this game truly special is the silence, or rather the fear of noise, because every step you take can betray your position. The generator you need to turn on to have light makes noise. The weapon you find makes noise. Even opening a door too quickly makes noise, and the creature hears everything. But what truly distinguishes the bunker from almost everything else in the genre is that the creature doesn't follow a script. It learns, it adapts, it's somewhere in the dark now, and you don't know where. It's not a game that scares you with cheap jump scares. It's a game that teaches you to fear silence before it's broken. And when it's broken, it's already too late. Imagine a world where time has stopped working, where the past and the future coexist in the same space, and both are rotten inside. CRONOS: The New Dawn is one of the most disturbing and original survival horror games of recent years. Developed by Bloober Team, the same team behind the Silent Hill 2 remake, Blair Witch and Layers of Fear. This game transports you to a post-apocalyptic 1980s Europe, where a catastrophe called the Change destroyed the world as we know it. You are a time traveler, sent to rescue survivors, but what you find on the other side are not people. They are mutants, beings that were once humans and now nothing of the sort. What makes CRONOS special is how it combines seemingly opposite elements: the Soviet coldness of the abandoned architecture, the visual horror of the enemies, the absolute solitude of exploring ruins of a future that never happened, all this wrapped in a dark and dense visual palette that rarely lets you breathe. But what really scares you is the feeling that the world doesn't want you to be there. It's not just the creatures that are chasing you, it's the environment itself. The buildings, the light, the sound, everything seems to conspire against you. In this game, you will feel vulnerable the entire time, regardless of the difficulty level you play on. This is mainly due to the scarcity of ammunition and resources. These force you to explore your surroundings and enter every house. But this game is incredible at rewarding a player for its exploration and curiosity. But use everything carefully, because here every bullet counts. CRONOS doesn't shout to scare you. It whispers, and that's exactly what makes it dark. If you like Resident Evil and Dead Space, then this game is for you. Give it a chance.
Good thing I was around. Traveler.
You are at the bottom of the ocean. The surface is miles above you. There is no rescue, there is no way out, and the only company you have are machines that swear they are human. SOMA was made by Frictional Games, the creators of Amnesia, but it's a completely different experience. Slower, denser, more disturbing on a level that goes far beyond physical fear. You wake up in an abandoned underwater station called Pathos 2, without understanding how you got there. As you explore its rusty, flooded and silent corridors, you begin to realize that something terrible has happened. Humanity ended up there, and what's left is in there. What makes SOMA truly terrifying isn't the monsters, although they exist and they are disturbing. It's the philosophy. It's the game asking questions you don't want to answer. What is consciousness? If they copy your mind into a machine, is that a copy of you? What if to save yourself, you have to leave someone behind, someone you generally believe to be human. Can you do it? SOMA uses horror not to scare you, but to unsettle you in a much deeper level. There are moments in this game that aren't scary, they are devastating. It's the kind of experience you finish in silence, not because you were scared, but because you need time to process what you just experienced. There's an unwritten rule in this game, a rule the game never tells you, but you learn the hard way. Never run, never make noise, and never look up. Alien Isolation is a love letter to Ridley Scott's original 1979 film. Not the action-packed sequences and heavily harmed marines, but to that claustrophobic tension, that feeling that space wasn't made for us, and that there's something in there that doesn't belong in that place. You play as Amanda Ripley, daughter of Ellen Ripley, aboard the Sevastopol space station. Your goal is simple: survive. The problem is there's a xenomorph on board. Just one. And that single alien is enough to make Alien Isolation one of the most tense experiences a game has ever created. What distinguishes this game from almost everything else in the genre is the xenomorph artificial intelligence. It doesn't follow a pattern. It doesn't have a fixed circuit that you can memorize. It learns from your behavior. If you always hide in the same places, it starts checking in those places. If you run, learn that running means you are nearby. It's a creature that evolves with you, and that makes each playthrough different from the last. There are moments in this game where you are under a table, holding your breath, with a xenomorph inches from you, and your heart races in a way that no movie can replicate. Because here, it's you, it's your decisions, it's your fear. Alien Isolation doesn't give you power. It doesn't give you weapons that solve the problem. It gives you a flashlight, a motion detector, and the absolute certainty that you are not alone. And that's enough for you to never feel safe in a dark room again. There's a ship adrift in space, no response to communications, no sign of life, and you are sent to find what happened. Spoiler, you shouldn't have gone. Dead Space is the perfect remake of the classic. Motive Studio didn't just apply new graphics over the original 2008 game, they rebuilt everything from scratch. The lighting, the sound, the narrative, the atmosphere, preserving the soul of the original and make it more terrifying than it ever was. You play as Isaac Clarke, an engineer who arrives at the USG Ishimura, a city-sized planetary mining ship, and finds something that defies all logic. The crew members aren't dead, they are transformed, twisted, reanimated human bodies, fused with organic tissue into forms that shouldn't be possible. They are called necromorphs, and to kill them, shooting isn't enough. This is where Dead Space creates its unique identity. To kill them, you have to dismember legs, arms, tentacles. Every body part must be destroyed individually. And the game knows exactly what it's doing with this mechanic, because it forces you to look, to focus, to see up close what you would rather ignore. But what elevates the remake above the original is the sound. The creators rebuilt the soundscape from scratch, and the result is astonishing. Every groan of the ship, every step in the metal corridors, every breath from your astronaut suit creates a constant pressure that never eases. The Ishimura breathes, and that breath is disturbing. Dead Space Remake is a body horror in its purest form. It doesn't scare you with the unknown, it scares you with the familiar, the human body, transformed into something that shouldn't exist. It's beautiful, brutal, and impossible to put down.
Truly divine.
I love the Resident Evil franchise, and in terms of horror, there are other games I could choose from Resident Evil 1 to the remake of the second one, but I decided to go with this one, the one that saved the franchise and brought it back to its roots, back to the dark, back to the fear. Resident Evil 7 is a brave new beginning. It swapped the muscular heroes for an average man. It left the infested cities for an isolated plantation in the southern United States. It replaced the third-person perspective with the first-person perspective. And with that single decision, it changed everything. You play as Ethan Winters, a man who receives a message from his wife who has been missing for 3 years. The message says only one thing: stay away. But Ethan goes anyway, and what he finds at the Baker family property is something that will redefine your concept of horror. The Bakers are not monsters in the traditional sense, they are a family. Father, mother, son. They sit at the table to have dinner. They call you by name. They laugh, and it's exactly this disturbed normality, this shell of humanity over something completely rotten inside, that makes every encounter with them genuinely terrifying. Jack Baker, in particular, is one of the scariest characters in the history of the genre. Not because he's invisible, but because it seems almost affectionate. And there's something much more disturbing about a monster that smiles than the one that just screams. The game is claustrophobic by design. Scarce resources, tight space, and lighting that rarely gives you comfort. Every room in the Baker house is a tension puzzle. You never know what's on the other side of the door. You never know if you are alone. Resident Evil 7 didn't just save the franchise, it reminded the entire world what survival horror can be when done with courage, intention, and with a genuine respect for the player's fear.
Welcome to the family, son.
There are games that scare you, others that disturb you, and there are games that break you in a way that you can't explain to anyone who hasn't played them. Silent Hill 2 is one of those games. The story begins with a letter. James Sunderland receives a letter from his wife, Mary. An impossible letter, because Mary died 3 years ago. In the letter, she says she's waiting for him in a special place for the two of them, a place called Silent Hill. And James goes because grief does that to people. It makes them irrational, it makes them desperate. And Silent Hill knows exactly how to exploit it. Bluebird Team, the same team behind CRONOS The New Dawn that I talked previously here, took one of the biggest risks in recent video game history, to recreate a game considered by many to be the best survival horror game ever made. A game with 23 years of legacy behind it. A game that is not just a classic, it's almost sacred to the fans of the genre. And they succeeded. The remake is not just beautiful, it's deeper. The environments were rebuilt with obsessive attention to detail. Every corridor of the Woodside apartments, every room in Brookhaven Hospital, every fog shrouded street in Silent Hill was reimagined with a visual fidelity that makes the horror even more real and closer. But what truly distinguishes Silent Hill 2 from everything else in the genre is what it talks about. Not monsters, not viruses, not alien invasions. It talks about guilt, about grief, about self-punishment. The monsters of Silent Hill are not random, they are manifestations of James' psychological state. They are what he feels inside. Pyramid Head doesn't exist to scare you, it exists to punish you. And the more you play, the more you understand why. Silent Hill 2 Remake is an experience that begins as a horror game and ends as something much more like a tragedy. There are moments that won't scare you, they will hurt you, and when the credits roll, you will sit in silence, not out of fear, but because of the weight of everything you have just experienced. This is the level that all the games here strive to reach.
I'm ready.
What if horror wasn't just what's in the dark, but the darkness itself was a story? What if fear didn't come from a creature, but from the words written about you? Alan Wake 2 is unlike anything you ever played. Not because it's the scariest game on this list, but because it's the most ambitious, the bravest, and the most improbable. 10 years after the events of the first game, Alan Wake remains trapped in a dark place, a parallel dimension made of darkness and narrative, where thoughts become real and stories have power over reality. To escape, Alan must write a horror story, his own horror story. and as you do, that story begins to manifest in the real world. Simultaneously, FBI agent Saga Anderson arrives in a small town in Washington to investigate a series of ritual murders, and very quickly realize that the reality of this town does not obey the same rules as the rest of the world. Alan Wake 2 plays in two worlds simultaneously, and each has its own logic, its own atmosphere, its own kind of horror. Saga's world is a police procedural dense, realistic world, with an investigation system that makes you feel like you are genuinely unraveling a disturbing mystery. Alan's world is a pure nightmare, surreal, oppressive, made of light and shadow in an almost literal sense. And it's in those moments that the game does something that no other survival horror has ever done. I won't spoil you the surprise, but stick with this. There are sequences in Alan Wake 2 that will make you wonder if you are playing a video game, watching a movie, or living inside a nightmare that someone wrote specifically for you. Remedy Entertainment has created something rare, a game that uses horror not just to scare you, but to fascinate you, to grip you, to make you want to keep going even when everything inside you tells you to stop. Alan Wake 2 isn't just one of the best horror games of recent years, it's one of the most unique experiences video games has ever produced. And when it ends, you immediately want to start again, to understand everything you have missed. My favorite part of the game isn't even a scary scene or a plot twist, it's a song, a musical number, something you will not expect from a psychological horror game. But that's what makes this game even more special. A game with soul that plays with your feelings, and I promise you that damn song, it's catchy as hell and will stay with you long after you finish the game, and you will hum the song in your head on a random day, at home, at work, at traffic. I mean, it's a masterpiece.
First things first. What's your name?
There's a name that any survival horror fan knows: Shinji Mikami, the man who created Resident Evil, the man who defined the genre. And in 2014, that man returned with a dark, visual and completely uncompromised vision of what horror can be when it's not afraid to go too far. The Evil Within begins as a typical police thriller. Detective Sebastian Castellanos is called to a crime scene at a psychiatric institution. What you find inside has no rational explanation, and before you realize what's happening, you are dragged into a world that blends reality and nightmare so fluidly that you are never quite sure where one ends and the other begins. This is a game that makes no apologies for what it is. It's brutal, unpredictable and disturbing on an almost physical level. The enemies are twisted, aggressive and brutal, creatures that seem to have emerged from a feverish nightmare. The scenarios change without warning. A ward that was an hospital transforms into a burning village. A village in flames becomes a labyrinth of barbed wire and flesh. But what makes The Evil Within truly special is the constant feeling of imbalance. You never feel safe. Resources are scarce, to the point of cruelty. Every bullet counts, every decision has weight, and death is always one mistake away. Mikami wants you to feel pressure at every moment. And then there's Ruvik, the main antagonist, a presence that doesn't just haunt your character, it haunts your logic, your ability to understand the world around you. Because in The Evil Within, the real horror isn't in the monsters, it's in the human mind, in what it's capable of creating when it breaks. The Evil Within isn't a perfect game. It has moments that challenge your patience, but it's precisely this roughness, this refusal to be polished and safe, that gives it a unique identity in a genre. Shinji Mikami reminds the world what survival horror feels like when it's made by someone who isn't afraid to truly scare you. And by the way, its sequence, The Evil Within 2, could easily also enter in this list, because they took everything that worked in the first game and expanded, made it more deeper and more beautiful. The Evil Within 2 is more open, more varied and more emotional than its predecessor. It lost some of the raw brutality of the original, but gained something that few horror games managed to have: a soul. I super recommend you to play these both games. In my top 1, there's a game that holds a special place in my heart. I remember being 15 years old and having a pretty bad PC, unable to play most games. Then I saw this horror game, made by a small studio of 10 people, which was their first game, and my expectations were quite low. I just wanted to play something, to be honest. But then, this game hooked me. It was genuinely scary and disturbing. That game is Outlast? There's a simple question Outlast asks you in the first few minutes. A question that seems obvious, but the game transforms into constant torture. Where do you run to? Especially when you can no longer go back. You are Miles Upshur, an investigative journalist, and you receive an anonymous tip about illegal experiments at a remote psychiatric hospital in the Colorado mountains, Mount Massive Asylum. You decide to investigate, alone, at night, with only a video camera in hand. And when you enter, the doors close behind you. Outlast doesn't give you weapons, it doesn't give you combat, it doesn't give you the illusion of control that most horror games used to make you feel safe before you get scared. There is no safety here. Here, the only option is to run, hide, and pray that what's in the dark doesn't find you first. The video camera is your only ally. During the day, a cruel metaphor because in Mount Massive there is never day, you see normally. But in the darkness, which is almost always, you need night vision. And night vision drains batteries, and the batteries run out. And when they run out, you are completely blind in a hallway filled with sounds you can't identify. It's a simple mechanic, and it's one of the most effective the genre has ever created. The inmates of Mount Massive aren't monsters, they are people. People who have suffered, who have been experimented on, who have been pushed beyond the limits of what human mind can endure. And that makes every encounter with them something far more disturbing than a simple scare. There's a tragedy beneath the horror, a distorted humanity that the game never lets you completely ignore. Outlast was released in 2013 and redefined the non-combat horror subgenre. It inspired an entire generation of games, but few have managed to replicate what makes it truly special, the visual, physical sensation of pure panic. It's not the deepest game on this list. It doesn't have the narrative of Silent Hill 2 or the philosophy of SOMA. But no other game on this list will make your heart pound like this. Outlast doesn't want you to think, it wants you to run. And believe me, you will run.
Little pig.
And that's it, guys. These games aren't just entertainment, they are experiences. They are those hours when the outside world disappears and all that exists is the screen, the sound, and that tightness in your chest that won't leave you even after you turn off the screen. Each game on this list does something different with fear. Some use silence, others use stalking, others go deeper, messing with your head, your emotions, and what you believe about yourself. But they all share one thing: the courage not to make it easy, not to protect you, to leave you truly vulnerable. And that's what makes survival horror unique among all genres. No movie makes you feel what these games do, because here it's you, your decisions, your fear. If you made to the end of this video, thank you. It means you are the kind of person who appreciates horror in the right way, not as a cheap scare, but as an experience that stays with you. Leave a comment, tell me which game impacted you the most, which one was the one you couldn't finish, or the one you finished and remained silent, unsure of how you felt. I know exactly what that feeling is like. I'm Yugito, and I see you in the next video.